Hello, hello. Everything got all wonky on me just now. Um, but this is Virtual Book Club, and we are here to talk about books. I'm joined by people all over the United States today. We are reading How Big Things Get Done: The Surprising Factors That Determine the Fate of Every Project, from home renovations to space exploration and everything in between. And the author is somebody that wrote the textbook on mega projects. So I was really excited to read this book. I am joined by the ever optimistic Hal Garin.
What lie are we going to say about Rob in the introduction?
The shy and subdued Rob Berry.
And don't you forget it.
And the unopinionated Carissa Pilster.
I guess we're all acting today.
I need to work on my opinionation, I guess.
No way. That's what makes it good. Like, I just named like what makes you guys come in here good. Thank you. I'm so grateful. Virtual Book Club started in October of 2020, when we're all locked down and we had no socialization. And I was reading, and I was just happy that, people would join me to read on Zoom every week. And what Zoom was turned into a live stream that happens every second Thursday now. But what hasn't changed is we still have great conversations and read great books. So how are you guys today?
Quite optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
Quite shy and humble.
Unopinionated.
How are you, Benita?
I'm speechless. Oh my goodness. Okay, no, seriously, book club really is the highlight of my week a lot of the time. And I love how we get professionals that come together and we have conversations that satisfy my intellectual curiosity and, keep me going for the rest of the week, as well as I learn from these books that we're reading. And right now, I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but I giggle during this book. I giggle. Like when he talks about
very close to the
when
end.
he talks about how these big projects flop and they're like overrun and 400% over budget. I just laugh because I'm like, not surprised most of the time, right?
Right. I mean, a lot of these mega projects, you have to overpromise to win the bid. So everything has to be just perfect, and that's not going to, life doesn't play out that way. And then, if it's a mega project, a lot of the ones he uses as examples are ones that are have some element of public works to them, which means politics and politicians get involved because the politician wants to be able to puff up on their with their chest that this was done during my tenure. And
Right.
if anything's going to go wrong with the project, they don't want anything to do with it, And so, but that's not, he talks about that as sort of undertones. But he doesn't really talk about that because he's really talking about, how to manage large projects.
Yeah, what I thought interesting about that, great point, Hal, because you can't, if you're trying to sell your project, you can't under promise. And what I found really interesting is while Daniel Kahneman gives his book a awesome review, they actually, in the book, he describes like a little rift they had about making decisions. And Daniel Kahneman is the one that wrote Thinking Fast and Slow. So he believes that it's all like psychological. And what Bent, I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Is it Flyberg? Are we just going to pronounce it Flyberg? Because there's all these extra V's and J's. It's spelt FLYVBJERG. So I'm just going to say Bent Flyberg.
Just call him Bent. He's bent to you.
And Bent says that no, it's not all psychology. It's somewhat politics too, to what Hal said. And I liked it how he said that, because I think we all avoid it. We avoid like political conversations, but perhaps bidding for projects, winning projects, putting together projects is in fact a political thing in itself. So I think a lot of times they are.
Yep.
Yeah, I think, a lot of times, and this is totally I'd say almost my realm. I haven't done mega projects, but my teams definitely have done in the $50 million to $200 million range of projects.
And you're a project manager.
Yep, a manager of project managers. So I think we were managing about 2,500 projects at the time. But something else I've seen that you're talking about the bidding in this too is, there's a plan for overrun, right? They already know there's going to be, you already have some of that figured in, because if you don't overrun, you make money. And then the other half is some of these projects there's a future plan for it. It might be, hey, we're going to build this, and because we're building this, we can get this client too that's going to pay us full price for it instead of what we're bidding for the government. So, especially when it comes to energy, where they're laying lines down, it gives them a chance to put that infrastructure in those areas, or fiber telecom, it gives you a chance to put that infrastructure in those areas, and then you have a chance to go after. You send your sales team to get another client that's also in that area that's going to pay you full price for it. So one you might take a loss on or break even on. The next one you'll go in and make a profit on. So
the one thing that amazes me is we all have jokes about project overruns, but clearly some specific industries have more than others, to where it's just the norm enough to where we have a lot of jokes about it. Why is that?
Well, a lot of times you do what you need to get the project started. And then once the project's started, then there's this commitment to getting it finished. I mean, no matter where you live or have lived, at some point in time, there's been some major roads project in and around the area where you live, right? And every time, it's whatever date they say the project's going to be done ain't the date it's going to be done. And everybody sort of knows that's true, and, you see what goes on those major projects like that, because you live it, because you're trying to navigate to go from point A to point B, and that major roads project has messed it up, and it's a source of frustration for you as an individual, because it's going on longer than they said it was going to. No politician wants to have any ownership in it at that point in time, because we're just throwing more money after it. But you can't stop once you're at a certain point. You're already committed.
Right. I mean, they talk about sunk cost in the book. You know,
I think there are certain projects that certainly in companies, where Rob, you've experienced this as much as I have for sure, where you're just saying, just let's stop, and you get the pushback, and nobody understands the sunk cost theory. That money's spent. It's over with. It doesn't matter. It's from this point forward. Why are we throwing good money after bad?
Mm-hmm.
But when you use the example like a major roads project, well, I just can't say, okay, sunk cost, we're just going to stop. That on ramp is just going to never get completed. It's going to sit there 1/3 of the way, and the cones and the barricades they'll stay there in perpetuity. It's not a problem. Sunk cost has certain elements where it makes sense. Never throw good money after bad. But there are certain times where there's no way out. You gotta get it to conclusion.
I mean, and the biggest challenge, especially with large infrastructure projects, you start to run into things that are unpredictable, like city governments that you have to get permits for. You might have started something and then it's going to take you 3 months to get a permit, or we've had to build over Indian land, tribal land, which is a whole different way of getting permits to build on. So, I mean, projects are challenging.
So. I mean, you think about, there's always, you guys know I'm in Florida, and so, there's a certain number of months of the year, or even if it's not a hurricane, you're just going to have, typical thunderstorms and tropical type activity, day in and day out, because that's just the nature of the climate. And then you see these major highway projects, and one of the first things they say, we didn't anticipate a major storm. It's a freaking 7-year project. What do you mean you didn't anticipate a major storm? What?
Well, here's another one for you. If you have to build underground up north, the ground gets so cold you can't dig in the ground. So there's like 6 months of the year that you can't build in like Michigan or Minnesota because it's so cold there.
Yeah, but who could anticipate cold in the north? I mean, that's
well, give it enough time, global warming, maybe we won't, who knows?
One thing I really liked about it, though, the book, was very simply put, it talked about what are your outcomes, and then what are the actions that you need to get to the outcomes. Therefore, foregoing all of the office politics and all the other nonsense that we have in projects now. And that's what I keep wondering. In theory, can it really work? Because you have the human element, but most times people in my profession are accused of being robots anyway. So I'm guessing Hal probably like that part too. Outcomes and actions. Here are the outcomes. Here are the actions. Let's just get to work. I don't care what Bobby Sue had for lunch or wants for lunch and who she likes and dislikes this week. I don't care about that.
Yeah, he talks about that. Like, I think he calls it right box, left box thinking. It's to me, using my own words, that's always to begin with the end in mind. What is the outcome we're trying to achieve here? Let's work backwards to how we get there. And a lot of times it's the other direction. We know where we want to end up. Now let's start with where we begin and we'll work our way to get there. And it's like, no, you work backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely have to know who all the stakeholders are in the project and who owns what part of it and all of that. But I think a lot of it's being a skeptical optimist when you do these projects. You have to be optimistic and you usually project optimism. And then at the same time, you have to think about every risk, every corner, look at the big picture, and like you said, work backwards. And say, okay, well, this could go wrong, this could go wrong, this could go wrong, and if this goes wrong, how's this going to change this project?
What I like is the stories behind the failures. Like, who knew that the Sydney Opera House, like the story behind that, did not know that. And I have to refresh myself to really repeat it. But, like the Sydney Opera House with the big, like, cloud-like structures or sails, that wasn't, they didn't figure out what material or what type of structure, what type of material would, like, withstand that until they got to it. So the material wasn't planned until they got to it. And so the architect had put out the drawings of what it would look like, but they didn't know until, like, okay, now we got to put the roof on. Another interesting thing is that, like, IT projects that are about, like, coding and not just physical projects, IT projects have just as bad a dismal failure rate as physical projects, like in the mining industry, in the oil industry.
Yeah, that's the one that kills me. I worked for a company where we were supposed to implement this electronic medical record system.
Okay.
We were about 3 or 4 years behind, and I don't even remember how many millions of dollars over budget. And you look at it and you're like, how does this happen? Like, how does it get to this point where it's absolutely this bad?
A lot of IT projects and organizations are one where the big lament is defining user requirements. The user can't articulate what they really want, and IT is anxious to get started on the project because there's time deadlines and pressures. So they try to ferret out user requirements through a series of conversations and meetings, and they start working on something. And then as the user starts getting involved, they go, oh, well, if it can do that, I want this, and I want that, and I want this. And they start finding out, scope changes and, get a better understanding of the user requirements when it's well into it. Or the technology is now evolved to the point where they could do something differently with a different technology choice. Now that we better understand, a lot of times the delays aren't, a lot of times from what I've seen, the delays are more on the user.
True.
Than because of the user's inability to distinctly articulate their requirements than it is on IT failings.
Right. What a great point. Yeah, that brings to mind this great IT team that we had in the past that had a SAP project justification report that you had to fill out. And it was quite intricate and very detailed. And so if a user couldn't fill it out, you wouldn't get your fix done.
Yep.
And I thought, yeah, no, like, listening to Hal just now, I was like, yeah, that's why that document existed.
One of the things I did before we jumped into large projects is I sat down with the customer and I thought about everything that all the lessons learned from all of our previous large projects, and would sit down with them and just try to ask every question that I knew could go wrong, and then just try to understand, where are they going with the project? What are they trying to achieve? And, a lot of times there's information transferred from one team to another too. A salesperson might tell you something that the client told to them, but when you actually talk to the client, they're not the one, don't have the same idea. So there's been, I mean, there was one project I found $3 million in savings because the client said, oh, we don't need to use that vendor. You can go find a different vendor. And we found a vendor that was cheaper. So it was, it was a way to find, significant savings there just because the client had, the original thought was, oh, we have to use this vendor. And the client's like, no, you don't. So once you start to understand the requirements for a project.
Yeah, the book mentions that, I think, is that, well, just like how I was saying, like begin with the end in mind. Like until your client knows why, what you're trying to get to, the project really shouldn't go any further, because we all have different perspectives of why or how. What I really respect about it, about this book, is that what Hal said the other week. I don't know if he said it in private or if it was on book club, but this much of the book is appendix and further readings and like the data, I guess. I mean, a lot of the findings from this book come from piles and piles of data, world data, because we're not just talking about U.S. projects, but we talked about projects. It talks about projects in Italy and the Europes, dams. Oh my gosh! Like what wasn't in here? Like projects that we would know about. Oh, the Pentagon. That was a good one.
Yeah. The Heathrow Terminal 5 is in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it really, it changes, it like makes the world kind of come alive, right? Because these are places that you might visit and you're like, oh yeah, I know a story about that.
But here's an example of a project that comes to mind that took, it's local to where I am. So the Orlando airport went to add, it was suffering from overcrowding, and not having enough gates for planes and not having enough parking for, passengers and all of that stuff and so once it embarked on this long awaited path to build a new terminal. And after many delays and, a lot of finger pointing as to whose problem really was, the terminal opens. The biggest passenger complaint was that you walk forever in this terminal. Didn't anybody think about the fact of putting in, those flat escalator type things that move you along faster, because you have to walk forever on this, in this terminal to get from, point A to point B when you're trying to find your terminal. And then they built another parking garage, and that parking garage is immediately full, and everybody's complaining about not enough parking, so what is the user experience from that? It took too long and it doesn't serve my needs. It's beautiful. Yes, it's beautiful, but
Well, and I mean so when you go into a large project, a lot of times there's one thing that the architect creates, right? I always think of, and I might be wrong in the way that I say this, but the way that I've learned it is an architect is basically your what do you call it? The one that's drawing the picture on a piece of paper on a napkin. They're the napkin person. Your engineer is who actually takes that napkin and makes it work. So sometimes what the architect puts together isn't something the engineer can make work. So they have to, they might have to improvise, they might have to change something, and then also the architect, I mean, sometimes they forget to think about things like that. It's like, well, what's this take to do that? And actually talking about airports, there was a study done. So, right, there was this, I forget what airport it was, but they put the airlines that were right next to the baggage claim, and the customers were majorly upset. They were like, they weren't getting the bags in time. It was taking forever to do it. So the airlines, so what they did is they redesigned it so the airlines were really, really far away from the baggage claim. It took everybody a lot longer to get to the bags. By the time they got to the bags, their bags were just coming off the plane. So that people were a lot happier. So, so that was a natural design of the airport to do that, because, the customers that were, they were getting there and they were upset because their bags weren't there. But by changing the structure of it, they were able to have their bags there in time. So
that's why I gotta walk a mile to get my bags.
I think a major point of the book that comes out that we haven't talked about, it's sort of a statement of the obvious, but so many projects still don't do it or do it well. And that is the importance of planning.
Right.
That's what he talks about as we talk about, think slow and act fast.
Yeah. Like that quote from, I can't remember if it was Alexander Bell or whomever. It was like, if I have a tree to cut down in 5 hours, I'm going to spend 3 hours planning it and then 2 hours chopping it.
Measure twice, cut once.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah.
But it's all common sense. And then how many times do we not do it? Anyway.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things to be said, and these companies that are trying to scale project efficiency. You're trying to find repeatable methods that you could do in project after project after project, but there's a lot of things that are really hard to find scale, because you get the politics involved with it, you get the permits involved with it, you get a lot of unknowns that are in these projects that you can't that should be figured into the planning of it, or you don't even know like what projects you're going to get. Let's say you're a large national corporation and you get a bunch of projects in Florida. So that's where most of, you have to send your resources out to Florida, and then suddenly you get some projects out in California. So how do you split your resources? Where do you tie that? That's when you start using contractors and balancing it. I mean, there's a lot to, and then what if you have a slow time in California and you lose contractors, or you have a limit of resources there. So there's a lot of things that play into it. And then, one of the things that we did or I was trying to start doing with large projects before I left the last company I was at, was looking and planning ahead, knowing there was a large project in the sales pipeline, and saying, what can we do to prepare for this before we get signature on it? What can you do? What can you plan for this? What can we work on? What can we understand? And then you get signature, and then you can start moving forward. And then what things can you put in place that don't run into logistics problems? Like, one of the things we did was pre-order networking equipment, right? Because during COVID, we knew there was going to be a supply chain issue. So we ordered equipment, and normally stuff that would take, a couple weeks to get to us took 3 to 4 months to get to us. And even then they didn't ship a full set of equipment. They ended up sending it, but we just started delivering those 3 months. Like, I think it was like the day before or the week before we got the equipment came in, we were actually able to deliver it to our client on time. So the client was excited. They're like, are you going to have any problems with the supply chain issues? Because we were doing stuff. But since we did a little bit outside, we had more planning and plan for risk, we were able to solve that. So yeah, planning definitely in these larger projects, you have to think about previous lessons learned, understand the client's needs, and then, really plan, and then think about also political as well as environmental. I'm trying to think of what supply chain like COVID would be called. Acts of God. So,
right. Well, it's surprising. it might be surprising to you how often supply chain is not in the planning phase. Can you imagine, like, not being in the planning phase and all of these time and cost things are as a result of supply chain issues? Like, you didn't even put them in the room in the very beginning. How would you expect to avoid these things or even have a chance? Real life, when I was in Houston, that was the planning part of this project that was happening. And when we were moving, it was like, I can't remember if it was like when we were in Duluth. When did the Ever Given happen? Where, a gust of wind from the Egypt's like blew across the Suez Canal, and then the Ever Given got lodged like almost horizontally in the canal.
And then I remember that.
Yeah, it was like billions and billions of dollars lost. Well, the project that my partner was on at the time, one of his big installments was on one of those ships, and there was like, I can't remember, it was like a month or 2-month delay. There was no supply chain people on that project team. So, and I find that, when I get called to the room in a lot of companies, it's because something got stuck, like something already is stuck at the border, or something, there was some problem. That the supply chain people really should be the ones that are working in conjunction with the supply chain people at your vendor company. And it shouldn't be just the project team and the planners and engineers working with the vendor. It should be the supply chain people too, because I mean, those are the guys that are going to pass the baton, right? So I don't know, that's just my personal gripe.
No, it's a good point. When you think about maybe not super large scale projects, but general projects where the organization, either an organization or a government entity, certainly is looking to put out bids, solicit bids for third parties to do the project. Most organizations, and certainly any government entity, is going to require a certain number of bids minimum, and then the pressure is going to be to go with the low bid. Well, the low bid is the one who probably didn't think about all the things that could go wrong because they wanted to win the bid. And we'll deal with those problems later. So just because you awarded the low bid contract, doesn't mean that ended up being the cheapest solution in the end. And that's where you want to think about government and politics and procurement processes in government and how all those processes work. It almost forces you into not necessarily making the best decision. You're just making the low cost decision at the point of decision.
Right.
Yeah, because in the book, didn't he lay out like a 5-step process in order to getting things done? And he said that it would be easy if you just used a few set of tools. I think I read that somewhere in the book. He had a 5-step process, and he made it sound so easy.
Yeah. He's coming from a place where he's studied this subject for his entire career, built major databases of projects and why projects have gone wrong. So it's just like anything we know exceedingly well, that starts to make perfect sense to us, we can explain it as fairly simple, but that doesn't mean it is simple.
Right.
It's just simple because that's the way we've learned to view it.
I mean, the basics of fiber is it's really just light through glass, and you just have to lay the glass down on the ground and send light through it. It's easy to explain in a simple way.
Oh, I'll go out. Let me go outside and do that right now.
You could be the next.
I'll let you know how it works out for me.
Well, I think that's the point that I was getting at. He made it sound so simple, but in reality, it's not that simple.
Yeah, this is why project managers get paid a lot of money. Not only do they have to manage the complexities of it, but they have to they have to stay sane while explaining it to everybody all the time.
Right, the staying sane part.
Oh, I mean, I can't tell you how many times you have to go and talk to a customer, and you know that something's not quite right, but it might get fixed. And it's like you don't want to scare them, but at the same time you want to be open and honest to them. So it's definitely a challenge, a balance of how much do you say and what do you say and how much do you tell about what's going on with a project. And on the other hand, how do you drive your team to get something done too? How do you, there's only so much you can do. And I mean, I've worked with Fortune 100 companies and they don't even have influence over these permits. You could have a small political, small town that you have to build through. They got a little mayor's office. They've got like one secretary that's running all the permits as well as like answering the phones. And, they're delayed 3 months in getting your permit. And then you call, you have no influence over them. I mean, I've heard organizations, corporations that look at investing in political parties just to have influence in some of these towns.
Absolutely.
I mean, there was an entire state that wouldn't issue permits to us. There was a conflict. So, and there was an entire state that was at odds with with the former company I was working with.
Huge.
So it was, you couldn't get, they wouldn't issue anything until like, oh, well, you need to, and it was a back and forth argument that went on for years. So
yeah, think about
game.
Building a simple pipeline these days. It doesn't get done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to have lobbyists. I mean, you think infrastructure companies have to have lobbyists. It's weird to think about that, but they need people every place dealing with this stuff.
Absolutely.
Just to help alleviate some of that risk.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't even I haven't bumped into a lobbyist in quite some time, not since I left like the agriculture industry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess the energy lobbyists are always in DC, so I would never see them.
The interesting thing about this too is some of these are government organizations asking for this stuff to be built, right? So, but it's a big circle where they say, oh, can you build this for us? And then at the same time, the company that's building it has to go get permits from that same government organization, but it might be a different part of the government organization.
Right.
Something to come through. So it's like, hey, we're doing this for you guys. Can you help push this permit through? Or can you help us do this? So yeah. Go ahead.
I wonder what Hal was saying when Sia. Oh, and props to Sia, by the way. She made our new backdrop for virtual book club.
Thank you, Sia. Appreciate it.
I'm gonna see Sia in, oh my gosh, tomorrow. No, Saturday. Got my days wrong. Got my
I'd
days.
like to see her reaction when you said tomorrow, and she wasn't thinking it was tomorrow. Well, one of the things total different subject on the book though that he talks about that was it makes perfect sense after I read it, but I didn't think about it this way. So think about a typical large scale construction project, and the materials show up on the project, and then the people there, work with the materials to build whatever the construction project is.
Okay.
So it is a construction site. With technology being what it is and the ability to measure specs down to the minutest degree, many of the things that are needed to construct can be created off-site, shipped, and assembled on site, so that the construction site is less a construction site, it's an assembly site.
Right.
And it was like, duh, that makes perfect sense, but I didn't really think about it that way, and so as I drive around now, having been sensitized to that, and I see, buildings going up around and large, big apartment complexes and stuff going up, and when there's workers on it, there's people who are constructing.
Right.
And I look at that and I go, well, that's part of why things take so long, because a lot of that could be modularized,
Mm-hmm.
assembled, created off site. And then the only thing you're doing there is, scheduling the delivery in the right order of the parts to come in.
Right.
And then, you're just doing your IKEA project from there.
Yeah, so that's why.
With just pictures, no instructions.
That's why there's planners, there's schedulers, there's people in the fab shop.
Well, I think the first time I saw houses being built where they had the whole frame, like, each side of it, each frame, like, done before it got, I kind of saw that translation. I think I was in photography at the time, or in photojournalism at the time. So I'd seen houses being built. Like, I was always around looking for pictures to be made. So I'd see houses being built, and then suddenly you start seeing this new thing where they would ship out entire frames. All they have to do is like push it up and nail them together, and suddenly you have 4 sides of a house built. The next challenge that you have to think of, though, is how do they transport that? You have to get that through bridges. You have to get that. How do you get that from where it's being fabricated to that site? I mean, a big thing that pre-built. Think about windmills. Those big giant. I don't know if you've seen this, where they have to transport those, but they have to close entire roads down. They have to figure out ways to get around bridges, and I've seen one picture where they're trying to build these windmills in China, and they've got this long, like, 1-lane road that's curvy, and every time this windmill turns, they like have to lift up power lines that are on the side of the road because it's going to remove like posts to get this
playing a game of limbo with power lines and
oh my gosh, and it's making like full like 180-degree turns. Like, they go up, they turn, they go up the next part of the hill. How do they transport this stuff? I mean, that's a whole nother project in itself, and getting these prefabricated things out to the, you have to have an entire team that plans, power lines that are tall enough or ways to cut it off. Actually, total sidetrack on this. I heard this story about so there was a guy that he bought this historic house, and he wanted to move it from one side of the town to the other side of the town. And he had to get all the permits. He had to get everything to move this. And the only way to shut down this street, they would allow parades. Well, getting a parade permit was a whole lot easier than getting the permits to move this house. So he basically got the permits for the parade, and then moved the house. Made it like about the moving, like a historical parade where they moved this house, and that was part of a parade float. So the city council totally hated him for that.
But that's creative. He gets points for creativity there.
Yeah, you made me think, though. Many years ago, I was asked to help organize a 10K run, you know, and I had run a bunch of races, and I had, you know, so I'd been as a participant. I thought, you know, well, if I've been a participant, then why can't I organize one? You know, and I thought about all the obvious stuff. And then, you know, as an example, somewhere along the way, someone said, well, how are we, you know, there are a couple of roads we're going to need to block off lanes on the course you've selected. Do we have police support for that? No. How do I get police support for that? Well, so then I come to find out that we crossed 3 different police jurisdictions.
Oh my God.
So it was like, you know, what my option was, you know, okay, do I get 3 police departments involved because I do need to have traffic control of some sort? And the conclusion was, because we couldn't get off the timeline, the race is on a certain day at a certain time, and I had to get from point A to point B, we ended up changing the course so that it would run through one police department's jurisdiction that was the most amenable to working with us. So it became to be a rather convoluted layout, the way people had to run and loop back, you know, when it, you know, and then this, and of course people were going, well, that's kind of goofy. Why does the course go that way? Why doesn't it go this way? But it was an example of, you know, you don't know what you don't know. What sounds simple really isn't. Contingencies you don't think about, and the value of planning and having the right people at the table when you're planning the project.
Huge. There's a real life example of like a mega project going on outside my window. I live right across from this big world event center that is getting built right now. You know, the event, the World Petroleum Congress, which only happens every 4 years, is coming to town. And this event center is being built, and it has been built for the last 2 years I've been back. I hear like them pounding like day after day after day for 2 years. But like the event where, you know, like all the oil producing nations are coming to Calgary, like OPEC is coming and the King of Saudi is coming. The event center, I just noticed that they took off the roof to check something in the roof. And we're only 2 weeks away. So I'm like thinking, like being 2 weeks away, shouldn't they just be screwing in light bulbs and like the plates for the electrical plugs? So I'm wondering what happens? Like what happens when this event comes to town? It's happening September 17th. And like, what are they going to tell people?
I can tell you about two events that we were working on that we had to, for projects that we were trying to complete, that we ran into problems with. One was we actually found the solution for, but it was a major events company or major, like they were doing the videos for like this venue in Vegas. And so they needed high speed internet going there. So we were trying to build it, but we couldn't build it in time. Luckily, they had a previous connection that we'd installed across the street, and then they had fibers running under the street that they could use to connect the 2 buildings together and use that as a temporary solution. So we were able to add another port to that other one that was across the street, and then they were able to run or add additional bandwidth to the one across the street, and then do that. And then we were able to finish the other project after the event, after the events had passed. Actually, in all the events, this was right before COVID, all the events actually got pushed out. So it didn't matter for that. Another one was a major corporation that was having like their annual company event at, I think it was actually in Orlando, at the Orlando Convention Center, and they wanted to bring in extra bandwidth for all of the phones and everything that everybody was going to be using. Well, they had, we had used a vendor that, they didn't give us, this goes back to not knowing all the specs of a project and not understanding, all of the details. Well, they hadn't done all the research for us, and apparently the vendor that we were using to install that was not allowed in that building. So it was, even though the vendor got us all the way up to the building, or got us all the way up to a box, and then from that box they had to go inside the building, and the event center's like, nope, you need a permit to do this, and we're not going to issue this permit, or it's going to be like 3 months to get this permit. And like the thing was in the next month. There was no way we were going to complete that. So we rushed to get another vendor and couldn't get by then we'd been working on it for 3 months. Couldn't even get the other vendor installed in time either. So it was, that was just we just looked really bad in that one.
But, wow. Yeah. Like I'm thinking like this whole city is going to be like, yeah, come to Calgary where we can't even get like a event center built. Come do business with us.
Yeah, that you definitely have to put the space before that first event. That's like, you have to have that room for that extra padding in there. I would never plan an event like right when a construction project is supposed to finish. So give them as much time as you possibly can.
Right. So yeah, we're gonna find out in a week's time or 2 weeks' time, and then we're gonna be live streaming a lot of the event because in our particular booth, anyways, I've partnered with Chris Postel at Vando, and so it'll be fun for you guys to like log on and on his feed or my feed or Peter's feed to see what's going on.
Well, let us know when the Saudi King's going to stop by. I'll tune in then.
No kidding, hey? I'm wondering, I better go over my how do you greet them? I don't think we'll be able to get past this.
Your Excellency.
Yeah. Okay, well, what's new with you guys? You changed your background there, Rob.
He's been changing it multiple times while we've been live.
What background? I just moved locations in my luxurious home.
Yeah, no, that chair is pimp.
I want to know what beer you're drinking.
It is root beer.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
See? Root beer.
All right.
Yummy.
Looked like a Coors Light or something at one point.
You know, I'm not really a beer drinker. I don't like the taste of it.
Me neither, but I do like root beer.
Unless it's root.
Yeah.
Beer.
Ginger beer.
Oh, ginger beer is the best. Oh, goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yum.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I can't wait to I think it's tomorrow morning I leave for San Antonio for a compliance conference. And I get to meet Shri and Rob, and then Sia and Reki and Jody, and oh my gosh, there's so many other people. It's gonna be cray. And what I'm looking forward to is the food, the Texas food.
Barbecue?
Yes.
Ooh.
Yes. And this is the way that I should eat barbecue, like once a year instead of like every day.
Good barbecue is amazing.
So I'm like, I guess according to the index, I'm halfway through the book already.
Yeah, I'll probably finish this one by Sunday this weekend.
I have to bring mine with me. but I'm gonna have lots of plane time. So we lost Rob.
Yeah, I think we're coming to the end anyway.
Yep.
Yeah, I was
So
gonna.
our next,
Rob probably had to go get a ginger beer. Yeah, after that came up.
yeah, no kidding.
I feel like we find more controversy in this book. for my unopinionated opinions.
I love how, like, and we all think that our project is unique. And he says,
Yeah, the point he makes is that's very, very rarely actually true.
yeah.
Yep.
So you think your project is unique. Think again. Understanding that your project is one of those is key to getting your forecast right and managing your risks.
Yes.
I love the examples he brings up. So as we have it planned, our next book club is going to be on the 21st, which probably won't work for me because of the World Petroleum Congress I was telling you guys about. So would it be okay if we did it September 28th?
That's when Rob's going to be visiting me, but
Oh,
we'll see. He'll be out here, but we'll see. I don't know when we're planning to hang out. So
yeah, maybe you guys can hop on together.
there we go. We'll go like jump in a hotel lobby and hop on to book club.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do the 28th. If you try to do it on the 14th, I couldn't do it if you were keeping to Thursdays.
Yeah, definitely couldn't do the 14th. I'm going to a Women in Tech, Colorado Tech Association Women in Tech event. So.
Oh, awesome. Okay, let's make it September 28th then.
Yeah, the only thing might be how we orchestrate the logistics of selecting the next book, but we can talk about that offline.
Yeah, we can talk about that in the group. Yeah. Yeah, and Vern really should pipe in, because if he doesn't pipe in soon, it may not work out the way we want. Sounds good. Okay, well, great book club again. I am so grateful for you guys to show up so that I'm not sitting here talking about a book by myself, because I'm not sure I could fill an hour. It'd be a short book club on the day that I show up alone. It'd be like 15 minutes.
Have you, I mean, I know we've been doing this for a long time. I'm like, I know there's been a couple times where it's just been you and me. I'm sure there's been times where it's been you and somebody else, but
I think there was only once where it was me and Hal, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you remember a time, Hal, where
They all start running together.
Yeah, they all start melding together. Yeah. Okay.
All right. It's a wrap.
It's a wrap.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.